Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Weekly Brief. This is your regular legislative update from the Maine School Management Association. I am Robbie Feinberg. I am the Director of Communications and Government Relations at MSMA. We are right in the middle of the legislative session. Bills are coming in very quickly. There are all kinds of public hearings. We've got updates on the budget. So we'll get right into it right now. Hopefully this won't be too long of an update, but there is a lot to get into. So let's start. I'll quickly share my screen so that we can get kicked off. Here we go. Perfect. So the basics right now, let's just talk about what you need to know. What are the most important things that are going on in the legislature right now for you as a school board member or a superintendent? So the first piece to know is that we are very closely watching a few bills that will be heard next week. This is going to be Wednesday, April 2nd, about student transfers. Now, our organizations have been working on some legislation around trying to make this process easier for school boards and for superintendents. There have been a lot of issues around this. We've been working proactively with other state agencies on this work. However, there are bills that we have real fear would do damage to this process. They would really, eliminate a lot of the considerations that local school districts need. So you see them right there on the board, and we'll go into them quickly. LD 218 and LD 607. I'll jump into those in a bit, but just know these are coming up Wednesday, April 2nd. Another important piece that we're going to touch on is quickly is the passage of what's being called the continuing services budget in the legislature. This is funding 55% of education costs from the state, that state obligation right there for the next two fiscal years. We're happy about that. We'll dive into that quickly. And then we also wanted to place on your radar, there is going to be a MEPRI briefing on Wednesday, March 26th at 10 a.m. about special education and as well as regional adjustments as well. So this is going to be the second in 5 different presentations that they're giving about EPS and school funding across the state. So let's dive in very quickly right here. We are going to start with those bills that we mentioned on superintendent agreements. So these are 2 bills we are watching very closely for April 2nd. They're having their public hearings. Number one is LD 218. And now what this would do is that it would have student transfer agreements. They would renew automatically except in particular circumstances. So right now, we have thousands of these transfer agreements across the state. They're when a student from a particular area, from a particular town, municipality, they want to go to a school in another municipality for various reasons. It could be their parent works there. It could be because of programming. It could be lots of different reasons, but it's largely done if it is in the child's best interest. Then schools will work together with parents and also work together with the state to try to make these agreements happen. And like I mentioned, there are thousands of these agreements already across the state, but they operate on a year-to-year basis. They get renewed every single year by the school district, and this is intentional because there are so many considerations that go into approving one of these agreements from one student, from one town to another, from one school district to another. You've got to look at staffing in your school districts. You've got to look at capacity, the actual physical space that is there. There are also lots of community factors that you have to consider as well. Maybe you have a lot of people who move in during a certain season, a lot of them, and then move out, and you have to be considering all of these different pieces. There's a lot that schools have to look at when it comes to bringing in a new student or sending a student out when considering that. And our schools really work together to try to make this happen, but this would take a lot of power outside of their hands. It would have these renew automatically each year unless there are certain situations like the student's attendance is irregular or they have behavior issues, those sorts of things. This would take a lot of the control outside of school districts' hands, and we have real worries about what that would mean in terms of it would potentially increase the burden on particular school districts, increase the financial impact, and have a real impact on those schools. So we have real concerns about this bill, and we urge you to make your voices known on this one. Then also LD 607. This is another bill around superintendent agreements, and this basically would make it so that the only condition of a superintendent agreement that must be met is if the receiving school has the physical capacity, literally the physical space to be able to accept a student as well as the staffing to bring that student in. That would be the only condition of whether or one of the only conditions of whether a superintendent agreement should be approved. And again, for similar reasons, we have real concerns over this. This really takes away a lot of the collaboration, a lot of the communication between school districts and parents as they try to make this work. It takes away a lot of the factors, like we mentioned, around staffing, around very different many different issues in order to make these agreements work. We have real concerns about both of these. They would really impose a statewide mandate that would really pose real concerns for our local schools and really remove local control, which is really crucial here. They would really get rid of that. And so both of those bills are being heard April 2nd at 10 a.m. We would urge you, if you can, to speak out, to share your perspective and your story on this. Reach out to us. We are happy to assist you in that process. We also wanted to share another bill as well that's also being heard on the morning of April 2nd. This is LD 660, and this is what's being called a transparency bill to public school curricula. But this bill is an immense mandate on our schools. It would require an immense amount of work. Every school would have to share professional development sessions. They would have to record all of their professional development sessions for staff. They would have to keep careful notes of exactly which teachers are attending these. They would have to make public and record and put these all in an online portal. The public themselves would have to be invited to all of these different professional development sessions. They also would, again, as I'm talking about, creating a portal of every curriculum, all these different requirements that would be put on our school districts if this bill were to pass. We have real concerns about just how much of an impact this would have, how much of a burden that this would put on our educators and on our school officials as well. It would be an immense amount of work that would be required. And there are already many different laws. There are federal laws and state laws already, as well as local policies that work to promote transparency. We feel like those are working well, and we're working even more to try to enhance transparency because we know that that community relation with our families is so important. We really want our schools to be community hubs, and we want it to be open about what we're doing in our schools because we are so proud of everything that we are doing in our schools. This would really just create a burden and a major cost driver for school districts, every school district across the state. So we are again pushing back on this one, and we would invite you to offer your own testimony about this bill, LD 660. You can go in person to these public hearings. You can also go to that address that's right there. That is legislature.maine.gov/testimony to offer your own perspective and story from your district. So that's what we're anticipating for next week, but we wanted to go into a little bit about what we've seen already in the past week. So we wanted to quickly break down the budget that did get passed last week. This is what was called the continuing services budget. And here's the important pieces to know. So this budget basically is just what the Democrats have called keeping the lights on. It continues programs that were already ongoing on the government level, the essential government programs from the last 2 years. It largely continues those on a baseline level for the next 2 years, plus just kind of taking into account salary and benefit increases. However, one key is that one of the only programs that is included in this budget is that it increases state funding to ensure that the state is paying 55% of education costs for the next 2 years. It specifically allocates an additional $150 million on top of that baseline level to ensure that the state will meet that 55% level. This is really important, and Democrats and really did kind of talk about this when they were supporting it. They wanted to make it so that school districts, local towns could budget accordingly. They wanted to give them some sort of, stability with their budgets. And we also heard from Republicans that they really support this 55% obligation as well and meeting that obligation. So what this bill is going to do for our state, hopefully, is offer some level of financial security over the next 2 years. It will ensure that you should get those numbers on your ED 279s. Things obviously could change if the state, economic forecast happens to change. They could always go back and change things. But as of this moment, we expect that that 55% will be there. We are hearing from legislators from both sides that they believe in maintaining that number. If there are any changes, we will alert you right away. We also wanted to flag that the state will continue to provide a 5% revenue sharing to local municipalities. So that means more funds for more municipalities to ensure that they can continue to meet their other essential services beyond education as well. And then beyond that, we just mentioned that this is largely continuing the budget at a baseline level on the state level. We're also going to be expecting a part two budget later this year. We're not sure what that will look like, but that will be basically taking whatever funding remains in the state coffers, and it will use that for other purposes as well. That will probably come later once we have more bills that have actually been passed by the House and Senate, because currently there have been very few bills that have actually made it all the way through the House and the Senate, and that'll give us a better sense once those have made it through what bills will ultimately get funded. So we'll be sure to keep you in touch about that in the weeks and the months ahead. Then just a few other things that we wanted to highlight for you to watch in the days ahead. So first, on Tuesday, March 25th, we're going to have a lot of work sessions on school choice bills. This is a series of bills that we have been watching closely. One, LD 220 would create a voucher program across our state. It would really completely reshape public education in Maine. We're very concerned about what that would mean. Another would raise the limit on the total number of charter schools in Maine. Another, as you see there, LD 512, this would also it would basically create school choice for students in small secondary schools. We have real concerns about all of these. We really feel like they would do serious damage to public education in many different ways. They would damage really the core of what so many of our communities and students really come to rely on. And so we're pushing back heavily. There will be work sessions on all of these bills on the afternoon of March 25th. We'll give you an update next week on what comes out of that and how the Ed Committee ultimately votes. Then we also just wanted to highlight as well, Wednesday, March 26th, that will be the MEPRI briefing on special education and regional adjustments. This is, again, the second out of 5 briefings that they're giving to the Ed Committee. This one's specifically focused on special education and regional adjustments. We'll have information for you going forward about kind of what comes out of this, what you should know. But if you want to watch it, you can go to that link that's right there in this presentation here. It's just legislature.maine.gov/audio /hashtag208. And that will take you right there at 10 a.m. So you can watch that presentation as well. We'll also include a link to that video of that presentation in next week's update as well. Then just a few more things to watch. We've got a few more work sessions coming up later this week. One on an act to prevent student homelessness. This was a bill that would continue a pilot program that started a few years ago that allows schools to give up to $750 in financial assistance to students who are at risk of homelessness to help them from becoming homeless in different ways. And so this is a bill that our organization support. We'll give you updates on what comes out of that. And then there's another bill around that would basically create a large pilot program across the state in several different schools to actually put childcare facilities specifically in certain school districts. It would be very broad. It would basically create these childcare facilities. They would serve the staff of the schools. They would have students working in these childcare facilities. We are not opposed to this, but it also, we as we sort through this, we go, this would be a really big ask of our school districts to figure out. They're already struggling with things like staffing, with lots of other challenges around childcare. So we will be watching this one closely as well, and we'll be sure to let you know what comes out of the Ed Committee in the days and the weeks ahead. Then further out, just wanted to highlight a few others. Next week on April 1st, there will be another bill that would require personal finance to be taught as a course in order to get a high school diploma. This is something we have seen in the past, and we're opposed to it just on a basis of this is another curriculum mandate that we don't feel like should be put on our schools. And then there are a few others around Maine Care, around increasing funding for behavioral and mental health services. These are contracted mental health supports for our students. Those will be heard next Thursday, April 3rd. So that's most of what's going on in the Ed Committee and in the legislature right now. That is what we've got for you. But again, as we highlighted earlier, we would love to have you involved to share your stories about some of these bills that we have already highlighted, the concerning bills that we are seeing here, and the damage that they might do to Maine public schools. We'd encourage you to share your stories. Feel free to reach out to us if you want to share your stories, if you need any help with putting together testimony. But that's what we've got for right now. As always, we thank you for your support and for your commitment to public education, and we'll have more to share with you next week. Thanks so much.